We're back. Season 2 of the Backstage Journal podcast is officially started. Welcome, everyone. I'm actually really excited to be back doing this again. The last couple of weeks, I've felt a real urge to get back on the podcasting game. I've missed it, man. I didn't know that I would, but it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing this. And also, I remembered that I had committed to starting the podcast by the end of January, and here we are. It's the end of January. I can't believe that. So much has happened in what, 8 weeks, 9 weeks since the last episode, like beginning of December, something like that. And tons to talk about. Too much, actually. I don't want to make this intro too long because I'm really excited about this week's guest. I've got Rod Castro on. We had an amazing conversation over Skype the other day. Rod is an incredible guitar player. He's an LA-based guitar player. And he's played for some acts that, I don't know, you may have heard of, maybe not, but, you know, works with people like Beyonce, TLC, BB Rexa, I don't know. People you may or may not have heard of, like I said. If you haven't, it's okay. But, yeah, I had an awesome talk with Rod, and I want to get to that. But before I do that, if you're new here, welcome to the podcast, everyone. This is a weekly podcast on all things music and guitar and gear and kind of whatever I feel like talking about. This season is going to be all about the guests, though. I've got my nice moleskin notebook here, and a couple weeks ago I was on a plane and started sketching out ideas of what I wanted season 2 to be like, and I just started writing a list of names down, people I really wanted to have on the podcast. Rod's name is on this list, and so we're 1 for 1, 100% success rate so far, getting people from this list on the show. Some people have been on the show before, but a lot of these people haven't, and they're all people that I'm incredibly interested in who are doing really cool things in music. Some of them are pretty high profile. Quite frankly, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them on the podcast, but we'll see. But yeah, this season is going to be all about the guests and talking to people that are doing really cool things in music, whether that be musicians or builders or, I mean, anybody in the industry who I think is cool and want to talk to. Before we get into it, though, a couple of quick announcements. The show schedule, the tour schedule is starting to fill up for 2020. So I've updated my website currently, rhettschull.com, under the shows tab. If you go there, you can see everywhere I'm playing. There's links to tickets and the dates and everything. But I have 2 shows to plug because they're coming up pretty quick. They're both with Noah Guthrie and Good Trouble. We're playing Charlotte, North Carolina, and Greenville, South Carolina. Charlotte's going to be on February 14th, Valentine's Day. That's a Friday, I believe, and Greenville is the next day, February 15th. That is not Valentine's Day. That's the day after Valentine's Day. So, yeah, those are going to be full band shows. We're playing the same set that we played in the Netherlands, which I'm actually really excited about. I think that's our best set of music yet. There's some brand new songs in there that nobody has heard, well, other than people in Holland who came out to our tour in Holland in December, which was amazing, by the way. Maybe that deserves its own podcast episode, but yeah, there's some brand new songs nobody's heard. They haven't been on video. They haven't even been recorded yet. So you want to hear some new music, come out and have a good time. We're going to play some loud rock songs. I promise to bring, I've got a new amp on the way, and as long as it's here, which I don't know that it will be, but if it's here, by the time we play that show, I will bring my new amp. It's going to be awesome. So Charlotte, Greenville, come out. Greenville's going to be a hometown show for Noah, by the way, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Hometown shows are always great. And we're going to be hanging out after the show. So you can come hang out with us, say hello. It's not like an official meet and greet type thing. We literally just hang out after the shows. But yeah. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the first voicemail of season 2. Now, if you're new here, this is something we do on pretty much every episode. We take a voicemail question or comment from a listener, and you can leave a voicemail if you call the Google Voice number 470-222-5851. That goes straight to a Google voicemail box for the podcast. And yeah, let's listen to the first voicemail question of season 2.
Hey, Red, it's Brennan White again. I was so stoked to hear the last episode of season 1 and everything. Super excited for season 2. I have a good question, I think. So I was in a band for like 5 years called Chasing Edom. We had like one really good gig with like Drew Holcomb, but don't bother looking us up because we totally sucked. That's not being facetious. We just sucked. But I did this thing on stage where I stared down the drummer for some reason because I was in a band with my best friend and we'd make eye contact all the time and all that stuff, you know, just vibing and everything. And I guess I want to know, have you ever, like, what are your on-stage habits like, or what's the worst glare you've gotten from someone on stage before, or maybe like the worst story of getting yelled at a rehearsal. You know, I've been cursed at before in the middle of a rehearsal before, and it sucks, but it also makes for good stories later. And I've certainly stared down enough drummers to make them think that I'm probably going to kill them or something, but I'm really just trying to say, good job, it sounds good. Anyway, stoked for season 2. Hope to hear from you soon, man. Bye.
So I don't have any stories of getting yelled at on stage or in rehearsal or anything, which is, I guess I should count myself lucky. Most of the people I've played with have been incredibly cool. I do have one story, though, that happened between me and Ian, the drummer from Noah's band. And this was years ago, so probably 6 or 7 years ago. We were playing a college show in Kansas. Noah used to get booked to do these college things, which were, you know, they were good paying gigs and stuff, but they were oftentimes organized and put on by the student body themselves, which most college students have little to no experience working with bands. So these college shows were always interesting, to say the least. So we're in the middle of Kansas, and we were set to play outside. They had a whole stage and system set up, and of course, because it's Noah Guthrie, we got rained out, and we had to move into their cafeteria. And literally, the sound system of this college cafeteria was the overhead PA system that you would make like morning announcements on, essentially. So we had to set up by this wall, and there was only 4 inputs in the wall, and the mixer was this like touch screen on the wall that only had 4 channels, and it was just fader controls for volume. So we had to figure out, okay, what 4 channels are going in. Obviously, it was basically just vocals, bass, and acoustic, I think is all we put in there. And obviously, there's no monitors, so we couldn't hear anything. And we started playing the song. I think it was a song called Death of Me, which we don't play anymore. And I had a complete train wreck on stage. Couldn't even find the right key. It was one of those things where I started off bad, and then, you know, it's weird when you like trip and then you can't catch your balance, and so you kind of keep tripping. It was like that. And then I fell down a flight of stairs because I couldn't find the key. I couldn't figure out what I was doing. I was all over the place. And in the middle of playing, Ian, the drummer, looks over at me and literally said out loud, "Are you okay? What's going on, man? Are you okay?" Because it sounded like I was probably having some kind of issue, like something was seriously wrong. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. Just deer in the headlights. Couldn't. It was really, really bad. So that's probably the closest thing I've ever had to getting yelled at on stage, which I guess isn't that bad, but it was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. When we got done playing, there was only, 30 or 40 students in there listening to us anyways, but we finally finished the song and nobody clapped. It was just silent. And so we just started the next song, and I could not get off of that stage fast enough. Well, it wasn't even a stage. We were on the floor. So it was terrible. So, yeah. Anyways, if you want to leave a voicemail for next week's episode, again, that's 470-222-5851. All right, on to this week's guest. Again, this is Rod Castro. Rod is an LA-based guitar player. He's a professional musician, session guitarist, touring guitarist. He is, well, you'll hear in the interview. He's an awesome guy, an awesome player, and I'm excited to share this with you because Rod dropped some knowledge in this interview. So, yeah, without further ado, Rod Castro. Rod, how you doing, man?
Doing
thank
well,
you.
man.
Thank you for doing this, man. This is really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've never done this before, so this is my first time.
No, really? This is your first podcast?
First video podcast, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, this is going to be video and audio podcast.
Nice.
So it's a 2 for 2. So just want to introduce you real quick.
Okay.
You are a guitar player.
Yep.
A monster guitar player, I might add.
Thanks, man.
Where can people find you, like on Instagram and stuff like that?
Instagram handles I am Rod Castro, and that's pretty much the main thing that I post stuff on and kind of keep tabs on everything.
Yeah, so everyone go check out Rod's Instagram because it's awesome. And quickly, like, just rattle off some of the gigs that you are currently on or have done. What are you working on?
Within the past year and a half, it's been Beyonce, Ellie Goulding, TLC, Bootsy Collins, BB Rexa, and Natasha Bedingfield.
So up and comers mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome, man. Basically, and you're touring and doing session work and writing with most of these artists?
Yeah, touring, not so much. I do a lot of flyouts, one-offs and stuff like that. I was on tour with BB Rexa for a bit. I tend to avoid touring as much as I can. Yeah, a lot of one-offs, a lot of studio work. So like I'll play on the records, not so much writing. I'm trying to like get into that world more. Right. But yeah, just a lot of mix of both.
Okay. And we found out about each other. We connected through Novo. I see that beautiful Miras behind you.
Up there. That's my baby right there.
Dude, I remember seeing that in paint. Like I went up to the shop one day in Nashville, and every time I go up there, Matthew will like take me through the paint booth or whatever. And yours was just the body. They hadn't even like scraped the binding or anything yet. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you got a ringer, man.
I'm so obsessed
awesome.
with it. It's so funny. Someone sent me a video of yours, and I don't keep up with YouTube stuff. And so it's like, oh my dude, like Retchel's talking about you. You got mentioned in his video. And I'm like, oh, cool. And so I look it up, and like Matt's there talking about me. I'm like, oh, that's cool. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like that dude's like a big deal. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, I felt so old and like out of the loop. And I was like, oh, cool. And then I just, started seeing your name over all of the Novo stuff, and I saw some videos. I'm like, this dude's a killer player. So
well, I
to be a part of
appreciate that very much. I am not a big deal. I make videos on the internet about playing guitar, and then I occasionally go out and play live. But okay, so I'm really interested in. So we met up, like we ran into each other last week at Winter NAMM.
Yeah,
as you do in Anaheim on the floor. You just like you make a plan, or at least this is how I work. I make a plan of okay, I need to talk to these people and go to these booths, and then as soon as you get in there, the plan goes out the window, and you start running into people, and that's what happened to us. We ran into each other and finally met in person, and so I kind of want to talk a little bit about your story. So how did you get to where you are? Take me back to a young Rod Castro playing guitar.
Man,
where does it all start?
I honestly started out just playing like punk, ska, and metal music. I was in like a punk band when I was like 14, and like the idea of being a session musician, for one, to me seemed like a sellout thing. Like that punk mentality was like, I'm never gonna play like pop music. Like I'm against that. And then, I got older and like I needed to make money, and I was like, okay, maybe I should do this. And then it got to a point where it's like, I didn't think I could do it. Honestly, I didn't know how. I've never taken music lessons. I don't know theory. Like I'm 100% self-taught, and I do everything by ear. And like my way of working and learning stuff is so unorthodox. When I tell like my trained musician friends how I do it, they're like, you're insane. And I'm like, I know, I'm so overcomplicate everything in my own way. But, I started out playing just rock music, and I guess the first thing that got me into doing session work was when I was 19 years old, I joined a band with an actor named Tom Sizemore. He was like he did like a bunch of war movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I love the guy, but he's crazy. And so I was writing the music for that band, and then he ended up having a TV show. I wrote music for the TV show, or they used the music I wrote on the TV show, and then I got in with some of the music supervisors. And we did a record, and they brought in like a session drummer, and he was just like, dude, you should be like doing session work. I'm like, I don't even know how. And he's like, all you have to do is learn music and play it. So he recommended me to my first gig ever. And then from there, everything just kind of snowballed into what it is now.
So did you grow up in or around Los Angeles?
Yeah, born and raised.
Okay.
I've lived in like the San Fernando Valley since I was born. So like I never really left this area.
Yeah, so it's home for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that was a big advantage for you starting out because you didn't have to like uproot and move to a city that like LA or Nashville?
I get asked that a lot, and I feel like it's been sort of a blessing and sort of a curse at the same time. I feel like, yes, it definitely helped because I'm here and I don't like have this immense pressure and like I can just take my time. But because of that, it took forever for my career to actually take off because I didn't have this like fire under my ass. It was like, I need to do this or else I have to go back home. Like, you know, like this was home. So because of that, it took me forever, you know, but
so I think you felt like you were in your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah. So I never really felt like this, like, oh man, I have to make something of myself in a very short amount of time or else I can't afford to live here. Cause I was just always home. But at the same time, like being here for so long, the reason I have all the gigs that I have is because of these friendships that I started at such a young age. These people came up, they took me with them. And like, you know, everyone I work with, I've been working with, or I got connected with people that I've known for over a decade. So the relationship building, which led me to most of my work, happened because I've always been here. So,
yeah, so that's something, and I'm sure you get asked this a lot. In my experience, it's all relationship based. Like everything in this industry, and that's what people always, I think, mean when they say it's all who you know, is it's about the relationships that you cultivate with people, you know, even your peers, because everybody, when you're first starting out, everybody for the most part I've found is like kind of on this one level, right? You're all sort of starting off around the same area. And then as people start to progress, you know, someone makes a big step forward, gets a new gig, and then they might call you and bring them up with them, and then vice versa. Like you get a new gig and it's like, well, who are you going to call for drums or whatever? Oh, my friend Ian, like we've been playing together for years. He's the guy for this gig. So is that how you've ended up in most of the positions that you've been in so far? Absolutely.
Yeah, everything's been recommendations. I don't think I've ever auditioned for a gig. Every gig I've gotten has been someone recommended me for it, and it was supposed to be like a one-off thing, and then I ended up getting along with them really well, and then it just kind of stuck around. So literally every gig has been just really good friends recommending me for stuff.
So what would you tell somebody who is like, I don't know, maybe 18, 19 years old and wants to do what you're doing at that age? What would you tell them to get them ready to get into this?
I would say spend way more time playing with other people than by yourself in your room. Because I feel like nowadays with the Instagram culture in that world, all these, like a lot of what I'm seeing is a lot of these young kids are in their room and they're shredding and they're doing these amazing things by themselves. And then you put that into a situation with the whole band and they kind of don't know how to turn it off. They're like fire hoses in a way. And you have to like break down all of this stuff that you're doing to be able to make it work in a setting, you know? Like, I would say, one, definitely play with more people, be out there, jam with people. You know, like we were saying, everything's personality based. Like play well, that's obviously required. And it's also, you know, if you play music and you play well, that's great, but that's 50% of your career. Like everything else is, are you a cool hang? Do people like you? You know, now there's more and more people wanting to be doing music. There's more and more people doing amazing things and evolving and doing great. So what's going to make you stand out shouldn't be your playing. It should be the fact that the people, when a position comes up, they're like, I love hanging out with that guy. I can be in a bus with him for 2 months. I can be in a room with him all day and just have the best time, and you'll get the call.
Yeah, man. I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, that's been literally, not just my experience, but everyone that I know in Nashville or even here in Atlanta who have landed gigs and have done stuff. It's all been that like personal recommendation of, hey, an artist or producer, hey, we need somebody. Do you know anybody? I've never auditioned for a gig, and I only know one or two people that have auditioned, but it was this weird situation where by the time they had gotten the audition, the gig was pretty much theirs because of that personal recommendation. You know, somebody who was already in the band working for the artist was like, yeah, this is the guy. And so it was kind of, the audition was just basically a formality.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's also this kind of, at least I had this conception when I was in school, that music was like acting, where you would essentially get some kind of agent and then just go to auditions, like cold calls all the time to like land a gig. And I've literally never had that experience ever.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if it actually was like that at one point, but I can't imagine it was. I know that like I do have friends that have like agents that get them gigs, but they're like film orchestra people. It's not like what we do, you know?
Right. Have you ever worked in the film world at all? I mean, you said you've done some scoring stuff.
I have. I've done film scores and stuff like that. But I don't treat it or walk into it any differently than I would just a normal session, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll kind of come in and they'll be like, here's this piece of music. Like they'll give me an idea of what they want. And rarely do people have already written things for me to do. They kind of want me to contribute my own ideas and my own vibe to it. So a lot of it is just like, hey, like have this, give me something that feels like this, give me something that sounds like this. And, you know, like I work consistently with the same people constantly. So these people know what I do. They know what I want. I know what they like. You know, like session work is 80% of the battle is getting into the heads of the people who are calling you and knowing exactly what they want, even if they don't know what they want. Or deciphering what they say. They say, I want this. And I go, you're saying that. But in my head, I'm like, I know you really want this. So I'm going to give you what my instincts are telling me you need. And then 9 out of 10 times they're like, that's perfect. And that's it.
So you're doing all of this with no instruction, no professional like music training. Like you're still self-taught?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you get there? Have you done any kind of, like, are you hip to things like the Nashville number system, or is it all completely by ear for you?
I know what the Nashville number system is, but I'm so like, like I was talking about this last night with like an insane muso friend of mine, and I've done like gigs and stuff where they're like, okay, yeah, you didn't learn the song, but we're just gonna call the changes, and so they're like, okay, it's like D flat. So I'm like, cool. And they're like, all right, go to the 6. And in my head, I have to like look down and do like the pattern of a major scale and be like, okay, that's the 6. I'm going to go there. But then I'm like, I can't just go up. A lot of times they're going down. So I have to like go there and be like, okay, an octave down. Okay, that's the 6. So I'm like, I literally have to do that when I'm doing any kind of numbers or intervals and stuff like that.
That is awesome, dude.
What's up?
Do you feel like that has... Okay, so when I was self-taught until I went to music school, and I found that once I got out of school, I had to take a year or two to essentially unlearn a lot of this. I had to get out of my way, because when I went, I kind of formulated this idea that, okay, well, to be a good musician, you have to utilize all of this theory and this complex harmonic ideas and content in order to make something good. And it took me about 2 years to really not forget everything, but to sort of unlearn that and to kind of go back to my roots. So to me, it sounds like since you never went through that, you've kind of always been able to find your voice and sound pretty easily. Is that true?
I would definitely agree with that. And I think that's what's benefited me, is that I have found my thing, and I have like my very niche thing, and I'm a good chameleon. I'm good at like really serving the music, and like my approach with music, like if I'm playing a certain style, is I look at it like being like a voice actor. So like, you know, to play country, it's you just sing with a different accent. You kind of enunciate these certain things that way. And so like, that's how I approach different genres and stuff. But I definitely have found my own sound and my own thing, and that's what I get called for, which I'm grateful for sure. But at the same time, it definitely has its backfalls, you know, like certain gigs that I get on, like a lot of these new pop stars, they want like crazy gospel arrangements and reharmonizations and things that to me make zero sense. So I feel like I'm having to like learn how to say things in different languages just for these certain parts. And for me, it's a lot harder to digest it and make sense of it, which makes it harder for me to perform it in like the most comfortable way. So
Right.
I think that's where it kind of bites me in the ass sometimes. But I mean, I just have to practice way more, do more homework, and stress out a lot more on stage than you would.
I don't know if that's true. I still stress out on stage quite a bit, but it's, you know, I think if you can find the place, like if you can find a gig that fits your wheelhouse, which I think the gig finds you. I mean,
Absolutely,
what I'm hearing
yeah.
you say is just like, and it's been my experience too, the gigs that you land are the gigs that you are right for, you know? And I'm sure at some point in your career, you've been passed up for on opportunities. Do you feel like you've missed out on opportunities that you would have been great for? Or do you look at it more of like, okay, cool, that should have gone to that guy?
I mean, to be honest, I feel like a lot of gigs that I get, I'm like, I shouldn't be on this gig. But but they're happy with it. And I'm just like, cool, I'm just grateful to be here. And I've always like, I have like the worst imposter syndrome in the world. And I think that comes with not having this formal training of knowing exactly what I'm doing, where I feel like I'm just guessing and flying by the seat of my pants. But I mean, to be honest, there's maybe one gig I can think of that I just did not get because I couldn't read
Yeah.
out of like every gig I've had. So it definitely isn't, I haven't felt like, oh man, I really should get this to benefit my career. I do it because I feel like it would just give me more peace of mind and give me a better understanding of what I'm doing.
The imposter syndrome thing is so real. Like,
Oh yeah, with everyone.
dude, it's like the one common thread that almost every musician I know, no matter your style, your experience level, your knowledge level, everybody deals with that.
Yeah. But you could either let it make you humble, or you could have it give you this total like narcissistic facade, which makes you not want to be, makes no one want to work with you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, to me, there's also the other side of it, which is like, it can actually hold you back, which is what I've dealt with for a long time, where you're so riddled with the imposter syndrome that it has caused me in some instances to not even step forward for an opportunity when it presents itself, because I'm just, quite frankly, scared of whatever, scared of the rejection, scared of like not being good enough, scared of not measuring up, or that feeling of being one or two steps ahead of everyone figuring out that you really aren't that good and you don't know what you're doing. Like, that's my biggest fear.
That's me every day of my life. And it's funny,
You know?
man, like I've had 2 gigs where I had that, where I was like, I wanted to back away from it because I was intimidated and I was like, I can't handle this. And both situations, either someone flat out didn't let me, or they're like, your flight's already booked, man. So if you back out of this gig, you have to cover the flight costs and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh God, I'll do it. And then it ended up working out, and I did a great job, and they were happy. And so, like, it's definitely been a lot of, like, whenever I get to that point, something pushes me to do it, and then I'm like, okay, I handled that, and then I'm like, okay, I'm fine. But yeah, every gig I get, I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this. And my girlfriend's usually like, you say that every time, and then you kill it, and then they're happy with you. And I'm like, yeah, but this one's different. And then, you know, same thing.
How important is the supportive spouse role?
Oh, a lot, man. Yeah.
I mean, dude.
I mean, on top of like the fact that she's, you know, amazing. She's, you know, we've been together for 5 years now. She like watches my kid while I go out and work all the time, and it's not her kid. So she's like, her support. I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it wasn't for her. So
same.
Yeah.
Dude, are you kidding me? Without my wife Tilly, like, I don't know what I would be doing. I probably would have like flopped out of music years ago and be, I don't know, working on Greyhound buses or something. I don't know.
Didn't you name the finish on your guitar after her?
Well, yeah, actually Novo did that. That was was like Matthew and Dennis's idea, because she we had a kind of a fun thing where it was like, okay, on the next guitar you get to pick the finish. And they had done, it was the white over 3-tone sunburst, and she saw it on Instagram one time and just lost her mind. And my wife Tilly's pretty hip with guitars and gear. Like she knows a thing or two. And so yeah, when we spec'd it out, they they called it Tilly Burst. And actually, if you go to Novo and order that color, it's like specced out in the spec sheet as Tilly Burst, which is sick.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, okay, I have to know, what is it like being in the studio with somebody like Beyonce?
I don't know how much I can talk about.
I mean, yeah, don't spill anything that you're not supposed to, but yeah.
Like those NDAs are scary and serious. But I mean, what I can say is that her team is incredible and the environment is so cool, like so stress-free. Everyone respects each other. Everyone does their job incredibly. Like her musical director, aside from being one of my favorite people on earth, is like the most musically inclined genius. Like I swear the dude like sees music. Yeah. And it's honestly one of my favorite environments to work in. Every day I get a call or a text to come down to the studio and do something. It just like, I'm so stoked.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm really lucky that I don't have any bad work environments. Every gig I do, everything I do, like everyone's the coolest people in the world. And like, that's something that I never take for granted, is that I don't have any nightmare gigs whatsoever.
Yeah, dude, there aren't that many like crazy egotistical nightmare situations, I feel like, in music. Like once you reach a certain level of professionalism, the system, I think, has kind of weeded most of those people out. Yeah.
And I also think it's an energy thing. Like if you put out good energy, like those kind of gigs and those kind of opportunities are going to come to you.
Absolutely.
And so it's very much law of attraction. And I'm just grateful that all my gigs are super fun to work on and super cool.
So I want to talk to you about like the pop world, the top 40 pop world, because there's actually a lot of pop music that's being put out today that is incredible. In fact, I was talking to somebody about this morning, and we see this a lot in the guitar community, especially online. I get comments all the time about like, oh, there's, no good music's been made since 1974, and rock died when Zeppelin. It's like, and I get so frustrated with that mentality because every single week, man, there's incredible music being put out by people and pop artists. And I mean, just to, continue on the Beyonce thing, the Lemonade record, incredible. Like, yeah, it's so good. So as a guitar player, a professional guitar player, a musician who's playing in the top 40 world, what's your perspective on that? Do you think guitar is, quote, dead in pop music or what?
I mean, I think guitar as people used to know it is no longer the same. I wouldn't say it's dead. I would say it's evolved. 80% of the session stuff that I work on is either has like that CCM, very ambient vibe, or so much of it is just what kind of crazy effects and sounds can I use to make this sound like it's not a guitar, but it is, So like the last Beyonce record I worked on was the Lion King. That was the first record of hers that I officially worked on. And, like all the guitars in there are super washed out, verby, a lot of swells, like things that like if I didn't tell you, hey, that's me playing right there, you wouldn't even think it was a guitar. So that's why I think it's kind of more of an evolution than it is a death. So maybe and that's just in the pop music world that I'm in. Like there's so many pop worlds and so many circles, There's so many pop bands now that guitars are very on the forefront and sound like guitars. So I think the answer to that question is going to vary on what world of pop music people are in, just because there's so many, I think, subworlds under that pop umbrella. Yeah. But so, I personally don't think it's dead.
So who do you point to now that's like one of those guitar-driven pop bands that you're into?
I would say like a band that I saw recently that just blew my mind that is blowing up is the 1975. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all.
Oh yeah.
But like they have that, like they're bringing back that Talking Heads, like 80s synthy, but super guitar driven stuff. And I got to open up for them last month at a show here in LA, and they crushed it, man. And I was like, like there's two people playing guitar the whole set, and it sounded great. And I think the thing now is like there's so much music out there, but only so little of it is getting attention. So I think all these people complaining about how pop music sucks are just not really checking anything other than what's on the radio. And there's so much amazing stuff out there, so much amazing guitar music out there, but people just aren't looking. That's my opinion.
I agree on the 1975. What was their record a couple of years ago? It's got a super long title.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I love it when you're sleeping. It's like this crazy record title, but dude, that's one of those songs. She's American. I remember where I was when I heard that song for the first time. I mean, it's so polished and the mix is incredible and the guitar playing, it's top notch, like top level.
And they're all really young too. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I agree, man. It's like there's this young generation of guitar players that are coming up now that are just sort of coming into the scene as professional musicians or artists that are in their early 20s, early to mid 20s now. You know, even on like more of the traditional sort of blues rock side, guys like Marcus King band. I don't know if you're familiar with Marcus King, but these guys that are just coming out and killing and pushing the instrument and the guitar culture forward to a place I think it really needs to go, you know?
Yeah, like my buddies like Jared James Nichols. He's another one who's like totally destroying. I love that guy. And Art Meneses, I met him pretty recently too. Like we're both Bogner dudes. Like these dudes are totally carrying the torch of like these rock icons that are going to be that next generation of, you know, what we used to have when we were kids. So it's still there, man. It's just not, it's not in the forefront, you know?
I agree. And I talked to Tim Pierce about this subject, and, you know, Tim says, and I agree with him on this too, that guitar nowadays is actually bigger and more popular than it's ever been in terms of people actually playing guitar and being involved in the instrument and learning and putting out music. A lot of it is just to the side of the normal sort of westernized pop culture stuff where it's not as prevalent, but all you have to do is go on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook and find some of the just most smoking guitar players alive today.
Agreed.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
You look at dudes like Mateus Asado and like they're just like dominating, you know? That dude has a million followers on Instagram and all he does is play guitar, like put videos of him playing guitar, you know? So
I know.
It's getting attention for sure.
I mean, and guys like that have a similar sort of reach in terms of playing in front of as many people as the rock stars of the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Absolutely.
They're just doing it on a social media platform instead of a stadium stage, you know?
And, you know, like I love a lot of the pop artists that I'm working with now because they love showcasing guitars. Like, you know, I did about half of that BB Rexa tour with the Jonas Brothers. And there's 2 points in the show where I walk up to the middle of the stage in this sold out arena and just solo for like 25 seconds and then go back. And it's like, a lot of these artists are still pushing guitar. She wants like heavy rock guitars in her shows, and all the bands were doing that. And like, it's still very much a thing more in the live world than it is in the studio world, but it's still there, you know?
I mean, guitar is cool. People like guitar players.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's just something about walking around on stage with a guitar in your hand that just, you know, it's a thing.
Yeah.
All right. So arena shows. How do you feel about playing in arenas?
This tour that I did was my first arena tour. I mean, it was cool. Like, you know, we're on in-ears, so the size of the venue means nothing when all you hear is this very isolated sound. But I mean, I had a blast. I had a lot of fun. We got to play the same one. I think it was the Pfizer Forum. You played it shortly after me. That was a cool place. The funny thing I think about arenas is that they all look exactly the same. So you tend to lose like track and memories of which one was what because they're all built the same. But the tour was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. We took a break from that tour to do Rock in Rio as well, and that was
sick.
Whole nother level. Never played for a crowd that big in my life. It was like 150,000 people. It was just
oh my god,
bonkers. It was so insane. It was fun,
dude. I did in July 4th this past year in Nashville. It was the biggest crowd I've played for, and they ended up telling us afterwards that there was, in total, because they had screens and PAs set up all over downtown Nashville, that when we played, there was something like 120,000 people that were watching it. But it was basically just all of Broadway from, you know, the end of the street to the river, was just a sea of people. And walking out on that stage was kind of a, holy shit.
Yeah. It feels like a movie. Like, it doesn't even seem real. You feel like you're just watching a screen. It's so much fun. It's great.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I'd like your thoughts on this too, because the tour in October for me was my first arena tour as well, or the Black Keys tour. And I totally agree. After about 3 or 4 shows, you start to get in this weird mental loop, because every single arena looks exactly the same. The backstage area is just a bunch of big concrete hallways, and you're walking past the Zamboni and the basketball goals and stuff. And then in the actual arena, it's just a big dark oval with a ton of seats. And it was really fun. The tour was amazing, but I really love playing in clubs. I would almost rather play a 300 or 400 seat club that's packed out than an arena. Yeah.
You lose a lot of the intimacy. You lose a lot of the connection with the crowd. You're really far away from them. So you kind of feel like you're just playing across the street and people over there are watching. So you lose a bit of a connection for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But all right, so let's talk gear for a second.
All right.
This is a guitar podcast. So we've got a bunch of gear nerds on here, myself included. You mentioned Bogner. So take me like through a brief rig rundown. What does your like live touring rig look like?
Live touring rig that I've been using is I actually use the Kemper Live. So with BB Rexa and TLC, they both don't want stage volume. They have everything go direct. With that being said, I still use my pedal board. So I don't know if you know Michael Britt, but he's the homie and love his profiles. And I use one of his profiles. It's a completely clean profile, and my board does everything. Like I literally just treat it like a clean channel. And to me, it's the best sound I've gotten. So it's great because I don't have to like change from what I would normally use with like my amps to just a Kemper Profiler remote. Like I treat it just the same as if I'm playing an amp. So to me, I don't like to think about what I'm doing. So
you're doing just like a total clean pedal platform. Essentially, the Kemper, like you just said, is a head that you're just going DI with. And then are you running any kind of like amp in a box pedals on your board?
I'm not. I use, I mean, I don't know if you would call them amp in a box. I use Vemoram drives. Like those are like my absolute favorite ones. So I use the Jan Ray and I use the Galia for like mild and medium drive. And my buddy Tosin Abassi from Animals as Leaders has his own company called Abassi, and they put out this drive pedal called the Pathos, and that thing is just massive distortion. So those are my 3 like drives that I use, and I have like the gig rig switcher that switches between all 3 of them.
Nice.
And all my like everything's on board, Strymon reverbs, delays, stuff like that, and
that's all into the front of the Kemper. You're not doing like the 4 cable or anything.
Nope. Just all into the front, mono. I have everything specifically in my signal chain to work the way it does, and it's just simple, super streamlined, and I love it.
Okay, mono. I'm glad you said mono. I'm kind of on this kick recently. It's not full on anti-stereo, but live stereo guitars they don't work in a live context. Like it took me a while to figure that out, because especially in an arena or a large venue, a large club, your stereo image, like your big delays, your beautiful like ping pong delays and your washy reverbs, that stereo image is going to be completely lost in the context of a full mix and in an arena. And I actually think it buries you in the mix. I think the front of house guy has a much harder time mixing the guitar forward if you have this big stereo sound.
Yeah. And then when you have like the ping pong delays, like the left side of the venue is hearing one and then the right side of the venue is hearing the other, like very few people in a certain position are really hearing what you're supposed to be putting out.
Yeah.
I have friends that swear by stereo that are just like trying to talk me into doing it. I don't know if you know Michael Fish Herring. Dude's like an incredible session guitar player. Plays for like Christina Aguilera, used to play for Prince. He's like an LA dude.
Yeah.
And we've had these conversations where he's like, you gotta, like, if I get you to do stereo, you're never gonna want to use mono again. I'm like, maybe you're right, but that also means I get to use less gear and bring less stuff. So I'm happy with staying the way I am.
Yeah.
I have no desire to use stereo stuff any time.
It sounds great when you're on in-ears. And you're in your own head. Yeah, it sounds great. Or you're sitting at home. Yeah. I mean, I play in stereo all the time at home. I'll send the Kemper stereo in. But when I actually come down to recording and playing live, it's all mono, man.
Yeah.
That's So we had a band open up for us, and they were great, but I don't want to like put anybody on blast, but there was one show, the guitar player was sick for the whole run, and he was able to make it to the last show. And, we were playing like small clubs, and so the stage was already tight because it was us and then 2 openers. And the singer from the band came to me and was like, hey, would you mind if the guitar player used your amp? And I was like, oh, of course, no problem, man. Tight stage, whatever. He's like, cool, yeah, he's got his wet, dry, wet set up and doesn't want to put all 3 amps on stage. And I was like, come again? Your wet, dry, wet setup? We're playing in like a 200 cap room. And I kind of pushed back on the guy. I was like, well, I mean, it would probably sound better and be easier if he just used like the backline AC30. He's like, yeah, he's real adamant about using his 3 amps. Just like, oh, all right, man. And I went out and watched their set. Again, the band was great. They're really cool guys, and I like their music a lot. But I was listening to the guitar, and he had all this gear on stage, tons of cables, 3 amps, and the whole microphones everywhere. And out front, it was just one guitar sound. It's just one, sounded like mono. Yeah. And so at the time I was just thinking like, oh, okay, could have just used the one amp.
I think like one of 2 things with that. It's either one, you're not gigging a lot if you feel like you have to have that for every gig, or 2, you're just bringing so much unnecessary stuff to every gig you're doing. Like unless you have a tech, which I don't think you would for a 200 person venue, it's more just to kind of, I don't know if you're allowed cursing on your podcast, but
by all means,
it's just like fucking, that's all you want to do on stage right there. It's like there's no point to any of that, man. Like my main rig that I like bring to every show, if I can bring my own amp, I have a Bogner Goldfinger 45 combo. It's a 112 kind of oversized combo, open back. And I've played that thing next to people with half stacks right next to me, and that thing smokes their half stack because it just sounds good and it does what it needs to do. And I'm happy with my tone. Like I have that amp, and I have actually a signature Bogner that Reinhold made for me, which is one of my favorite amps in the world. It's like this tiny little head, and I don't use anything else, man. That's like, that
is awesome, man.
I'm so happy. All I use is Bogner amps. Like if I'm not using Kemper or the Strymon Iridium, that's what I use. And
the Bogner sound, is it? I've played a couple, like I've had a Shiva on loan for a while. Incredible.
Yeah,
incredible
the cleans on that
amplifier.
thing, it's incredible, yeah.
Yeah, so are you going for mostly kind of like the plexi-is like kind of sound, so mid-forward Marshall tones?
I don't know, to be honest. Like my Bogner amps, I treat them the same way like the Kemper. It's just a clean platform. My pedals do all the work. So like, those Vemmer amps kind of get a very, I guess, closer to a Marshall-y sound, but because the Bogners are so bassy and so compressed, they just sound a lot deeper and fuller. So it's a very specific sound that I've yet to hear any other amp that sounds like that. And like, there's so many good amps out there, but like, there's something about the combination of my pedals with my Bogner amps that's just my sound. And I'm so happy with it that I have no desire to look elsewhere,
Do you feel like you prefer playing the real amp over the Kemper?
It's so funny. I did a video interview with Kemper here at my studio like 2 days ago, and they're the nicest guys. They're very German. And he's like, I have a sticky question for you, and if you want me to not air it, I won't. I can take it out. And he's like, John Mayer says that modeling just isn't there yet. He's like, what do you think about that? I'm like on camera, and I'm just like, how do I word this in a way that isn't going to offend you and isn't going to offend Bogner when this thing comes out? Because I love Reinhold Bogner, but he gives me so much crap about using a Kemper all the time.
Right.
Like, I remember one time someone broke into my car and stole my signature amp, and he's like, "Oh man, that sucks." He's like, "It's too bad you didn't have your Kemper in there instead." I was like, thanks for the sympathy. But you know, the one thing I told him, which I think gave him an answer that he was satisfied with and that I didn't feel like I was saying more than I wanted to say, was, you know, if I'm on ears or if I use it on a record that's mixed properly, I don't hear a difference.
Yeah.
If I were to have my amp in front of me and I were to have a Kemper like with speakers or going into like a power amp in a cab, I would absolutely hear the difference.
Right.
But for the situation that I use Kempers for, I'm fine. You know, if you're on even if you're using like a really good amp on in-ears, you're not hearing the amp in your ears like you would in front of you, because you're not getting any air. It's usually like an SM57 right in front of the speaker. Yeah. And you're getting just that very flat in your face sound, which you would be getting out of a Kemper. Yeah. And you know, the Kemper's in a mix, if it's mixed properly and everything's in there, like, you know, if you listen to your favorite records and you hear the isolated guitars, it's super nasally, super thin. They scoop out all the lows. They put it in the frequency that fits properly, that complements the rest of the sonic spectrum of the song. Yeah. And same thing with the Kemper. It's like, if it's in, like, I've done sessions where I used a Kemper and I'm just like, oh man, like I don't know if I use an actual amp on that or not, because in the mix, everything has its proper place and it sounds great. Yeah. So that was my answer, was like, you know, if I'm on ears or if I'm hearing it mixed properly, it's, I wouldn't be able to split the hairs and figure out what's what.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to that thing where, you know, I find the people that are most adamantly against, and this isn't always the case, this is a generalization, let me clarify, but I find that most people that are so adamantly against all things digital modeling, and again, I see it in comments on my videos all the time, most of those people who I know personally who are like that don't actually gig out that much, you know, and if they do work, most of the time it's like just strictly recording stuff. Which that's, you know, it's great to have the real amps in the studio where you can take the time, get the sounds right, use the preamps. But if you're working and you're touring and you're playing festivals, like, you know, festival season's right around the corner now, which I'm sort of dreading because we had a really tough year last year in terms of weather. We got rained out so much. So in those kind of situations, especially on in-ears, one of the gigs I'm on, we have in-ears and it's like, dude, I just grab the Helix and take it and throw it on the floor. It sounds great. It feels as good as my real amp would feel in ears, like you were just saying. It's consistent. It sounds the same every single night. Yeah. I'm not worried about mic placement or, you know, was the front of house guy sober or not when he was patching everything in and EQing everything. Like, it's a tool for a job. It's definitely not going to replace, you know, my amps back here.
I think that's what Pete Thorne says, is like, it's the right tool for the right job. And that's the best way to look at it. And I think people, and it's so funny because like I was one of the first dudes in LA in my circle of friends that got a Kemper. It was like when it first came out, I'd been working with the producer and he's like, you got to get a Kemper. I went over, tried it, and I was like, this sounds great. And I went and bought one and all my friends were just bashing on me, talking shit. They're like, man, how are you like, you know, total purists. Every single person that gave me shit for having a Kemper now has one and loves it and uses it everywhere. And I'm like, but you're welcome. You know? So yeah, man. And like, dude, the Iridium is another great thing. Like I was lucky to do a lot of the videos for the product release for that. And when I was on tour with BB, all of my remote sessions was with the Iridium. And everyone was super happy with it. Like I remember that I ended up getting the Bootsy Collins gig while I was on tour with BB. Craziest story. We were on the same flight to Rock in Rio, and he was playing that night. And on the plane was us, Foo Fighters, Seal, and Bootsy on the same plane going to Rio, which sounds like something out of a movie.
It does.
And I see Bootsy, and I'm just like, he's walking into the gate while we're getting ready to board. And I had done a session that he was on like 10 years ago. And I was just like, hey man, like I worked on a track with you like 10 years ago. You probably don't even remember it, but that was like one of like the biggest moments of my life. I'm like such a huge fan. And he was just so cool. We sat and talked for like 10 minutes. We get off the plane. We talk again for another 10 minutes. And he's like, hey man, do you play lead guitar? And I was like, yeah. He's like, do you have a way to record like on you right now? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'm sending you a song. Can you like record it today? Like as soon as you get to your hotel? I'm like, absolutely. So
yeah.
I go to my hotel, I plug in the Iridium. I'm in Brazil and I'm using these like power converters and none of them are like staying in. So I have like pillows holding the freaking power supplies up there just so it can hold it in place while I can track. And I tracked some stuff for him, and the first thing I sent him, he loved it, and it made it on the record, and it ended up being a song with me, him, and Buckethead. And Buckethead was doing the rhythms, and he didn't get a chance to do the leads, and he's like, I need him like right now, and I won't be able to get him from him before I need to put the song out, because it was like a Halloween song it was his own version of Monster Mash. And so I did it, and I used the Iridium on it, and I sent it to him, and he's just like, these guitars sound incredible. And I was like, cool. And, you know, I listened to the song once they mix it, and I'm like, it sounds freaking great. And so since then, I've been doing like a bunch of session stuff for him. I'm writing songs for his next record, and like, but all because of this crazy, like, just off-chance meeting in an airport, and having this tiny little Iridium. Like, if I didn't have the Iridium with me at that point, I wouldn't have been able to get my Kemper, because it was already at the venue. Yeah. So it's a tool for a job, just like you said, man.
My Iridium goes with me everywhere now. Because again, it's like, it's a size of a pedal. So it's why not throw it in your gig bag? And, you know, there you go. There's a life lesson in there, kids. And that lesson is always have your Strymon Iridium in case you run into Bootsy Collins on a flight and he needs you to track lead guitars that day.
That's exactly what happened. And when I told the guys from Strymon that story, they were like laughing hysterically. And I'm like, that's exactly what happened, you know? And I remember like a few weeks later, we were doing the video shoot for the song, and he asked me to come down. And I'm like, he's like, man, I told him, like, dude, it's such an honor to be working with you. Like, seriously. And he's like, you know what, man? He's like, talks really funny. He's like, you know what, baby bubba? Like, he says stuff like that. It's freaking hilarious. And he's like, you saw who else was on that flight with us that day, right? And he's like, I saw all those dudes, like Seal and Foo Fighters at the show, and they were all saying how they saw me on the flight and they were scared to come up to me and they wouldn't say anything. But then they came up to me, he's like, you're the only person who came up to me and said something to me. And now you're over here playing on my song.
That's so
and I'm just
sick,
like,
man.
And I was just like, this is insane.
That is amazing, dude.
And that's how that happened. It was just crazy. So another lesson for kids. Okay, so I wanted to touch back on the whole personality thing that I forgot to say, that I think is super important, that I tell people all the time. There is such a fine balance that you have to tread between being too shy, like with actually like putting yourself out there, and coming off as like really desperate and like showing that you need a gig and being like persistent, you know? Yeah. Like I was talking about this like the other day with people, and I'm like, if you're a really good player and you're a really nice guy and you're not working, there's something that you're either doing wrong or you're not doing. Because as far as musicians and as far as like, you know, working musicians, there's no shortage of music and there's no shortage of work. Yeah. So you got to figure it out what it is that you're either not doing or doing too much of, and adjust that, because at this point, everything has to do with who you are as a person and not just your playing. Like, you either need to put yourself out there more and make yourself available, make people remember you. Because you could be the nicest guy in the world, but if people aren't seeing your face, if people aren't hanging out with you or talking to you, they're not going to remember to call you. They're not going to go through their phone and be like, who can I call? They'll be like, oh, I just saw that person the other day, or I just saw this video of this person the other day. I'm gonna hit him up right now. Yeah. It's all just the shortest, you know, last three people they can think of they saw. If it happens to be you and you're super cool, you're going to get a call for the gig.
You have to be present to win.
Absolutely.
Like that's the thing, man. And you know, kind of the dark side of touring, and I experienced this, you know, so about 3.5 years ago, I got a gig touring based out of Nashville. And so I was traveling up to Nashville all the time, and, you know, was hanging out and meeting people, but was never there playing in town. And I was never here in Atlanta playing in town. So I was lucky to have the touring gig pretty consistently for about 2 years. I was working and playing every week just about, and went all over North America and Mexico, and everything was great. But during that time, everything at home dried up, and the stuff I was doing got filled in with other dudes. And I wasn't present enough in Nashville to really drive in those connections, and like be it open jams, be it friends shows, be sitting in with people when asked. And so other people were filling in those spots. And so when my gig ended about 2 years ago, which coincidentally is about when I started the YouTube channel, I kind of had a dry spell where I was looking around and there wasn't really anything happening because I had to kind of start over. I had to kind of start from ground zero in terms of looking for gigs and getting in and hanging with people. And so I think you're absolutely right. It is the balance of, okay, you got to be able to play. You don't have to be, you know, a virtuoso. Yeah. Like by no means do you need to be like anywhere near the best player, but you need to know what you're doing and be confident.
Competent.
Yeah. Competent in your skill set. You have to be a good hang, but there is that third element of like not being desperate, but being present.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing I learned a lesson early on, it's kind of in the same vein that I tell people, is like, don't be the guy that's like walking up to somebody in a venue, be like, hey man, listen, if you ever need a guitar player, like, yo, here's my card, dude. Let me give you my number.
Yeah.
You know, because I did that early on. And the first time somebody did it to me was a huge eye opener. A drummer who's actually a good friend of mine now came up to me. He'd like just moved to town. It's like, hey man, if you ever need a drummer, like, you know, I'm looking for gigs. And I was kind of like, whoa, that's a little forward. And then the light bulb went off where it's like, oh shit, I do that. I do that to people.
Yeah, man. You know, that's a lesson I learned, and now people do it all the time. And I think I've been nice about it with certain people where I'm just like, hey man, like I appreciate where you're coming from, but I don't think that that's ever going to work to just completely cold call people, like go up to people, like, you know, people call people that they have relationships with and stuff like that. So what I would suggest for you is make friends before you start asking for work.
Right.
And that's everything. And that's the other thing that I tell a lot of people and a lot of kids is like, dude, like get the idea of networking out of your head.
Yes.
Like it's so opportunistic. It's so ingenuine. It's basically saying, hey, I want to be friends with you because I think you can benefit me. It's like,
I want to use this relationship.
Which is the worst thing ever. And I tell people all the time, like, do not network. Don't say you're here to network. Say, just make friends with people. Even if you don't think there's anything in it for you, just be cool. Help everyone. The people you help will help you, not because they feel like they have to, because you did the same for them. You know, like that's how I got every gig and everything that I have now, is because I'm just friends with everyone, you know?
Right.
And that's so important. It's so important to not like look at people like opportunities, but just as people, you know?
Right.
And
that's how you play the long game in this.
Absolutely.
That's how you do this for the rest of your life. Because you're right. It's like somebody might not have anything going on now, but they're a cool person and a great relationship, and you respect them and you respect their talent and you respect the relationship that you have. In a year, 2 years, 3 years, they could be the next biggest thing in whatever it is that they do.
Absolutely.
And you are then in a position to work with them in a real capacity because you have a relationship and a friendship.
Absolutely. Like I'll tell you how I got into the position working with Beyonce's camp, and it's exactly what we just talked about, like right this second. You know, I was working at a studio for a long time, a guy named Skip Saylor. I was his main session guitarist for like, I don't know, a good 10 years. And their engineer quit, and I recommended one of my best friends. He was like the drummer in my punk band when we were younger. He wanted to be an engineer. You know, he was new at it. He was up and coming, but he really wanted to take it seriously and get to that next level. And I vouched for him and I fought for him. And I was like, you need to hire this guy. You need to hire this guy. Like, he's got serious work ethic. He will do whatever you need to do and he'll get it done. And he got the gig because I vouched for him. Within 2 years, he engineered Lemonade and got nominated for a Grammy.
Wow.
And, you know, like, I don't take credit for it because you can't take credit for someone's success when all you did was open a door. You know, they went in there and they did the work and they got themselves to where they were. So, you know, he did that, and then he ended up just working with them full time, you know? And then an opportunity came up for a guitar player for something, and he was just like, you got to call Rod. And I went in and I did it and got along with them, and that's how I'm involved with them. And it was because I helped out a friend of mine who in no way benefited me in any way that I thought. I was just like, this is a good dude. He deserves a gig. I want to help him out because I just want to help people, you know?
Yeah.
I want to help my friends. And that's exactly how it happened.
Dude, that's amazing. And the other important element to that story is that when the opportunity opened up for him, he was ready and prepared and came in with a professional mindset and skill set and killed the gig and did really well, right? Yeah. Like that's the other side of this, is it's not all just the relationship side. It's like when that door finally opens, you need to be prepared to go in and basically undersell, over deliver. Yeah, I feel like
absolutely. I'm a big fan and doer of that saying. You know, like people say, like luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and it's absolutely true.
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
Like I love setting expectations low.
Yeah,
so that they're never disappointed and then doing a good job, and it's like cool. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, dude, this has been an awesome chat. Thank you for coming on, man.
I'm so glad we did this, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So there you go. That was Rod Castro, the one and only. Hope you enjoyed that chat. You know, one of the things I love about this podcast is I get the opportunity to sit down and actually have a real discussion with people who I respect and look up to. And Rod is one of those guys. He's one of those guys that's actually out there doing it. And, you know, hopefully it inspired you in some way, or you learned something, because I know I did just from talking to him. So again, you can go find Rod on Instagram at I am Rod Castro. Everyone go give him a follow, show him some love, keep up with what he's doing over there, and maybe we can push him into starting a YouTube channel or something. I don't know. Okay, so now this is the final segment of the show. Again, if you're new here, this is something we do every week, and this is honestly one of my favorite parts of the podcast. It's time to feature a listener-submitted original song. Like I said, we do this every single week. And here's how it works. If you are an artist, you're playing a band, you write songs, you mix songs, if you are at all involved in the creative process of making music and you want to feature your music or get your music featured on the podcast, you can submit an original song to backstagejournalpod@gmail.com. That's a website, or sorry, an email address I have set up for the podcast for the sole purpose of taking in original song submissions. Each week, I'll pick one original song to feature. And so what I ask is that you send a downloadable track, not a YouTube link or Spotify link, but something I can actually download, to backstagejournalpod@gmail.com. And the music can be anything, any genre. It can be any style. It can be instrumental, singer-songwriter, rock, whatever you want. Literally does not matter, as long as I can download it and put it here in the song, or in the in the podcast. And also write a little blurb in the email telling me a little bit about the song, about you, about your band, why you wrote it, how you recorded it, just some kind of backstory on the track. So the first song submitted for season 2 of the podcast, this is from Brian Ream of Columbus, Ohio. And Brian says this is a song called Can't Keep Still by an artist he plays for named Frankie Soleil, S-O-L-E-I-L, Soleil. I don't know how you say the last name. Sorry. He said he used a Gibson Les Paul, Fender Telecaster, and a second Tele with P90s. All the guitar tones are various different Kemper profiles, and the song was mixed and mastered by Jacob Mooney. And I actually really like this. This is kind of a fun, upbeat pop punk kind of thing. I'd like to actually play more of this kind of stuff. I might write a track similar to this. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the first episode of season 2. Almost said season 1, but it's not. We're in season 2. If you haven't done so, please subscribe on Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, or stream it on the website. And I will see you guys same time, same place next week for the next episode. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the track.